Now, we have here the steps, the procedure that has to be followed in chronological order in terms of how we're going to handle problems concerning multiple effect evaporation. So chronological meaning they have to really be followed in this particular order as suggested by John Puplis, the main one of the authors of our unit operations book. So the first step here, actually, there are around 12 steps or 13 steps in this particular multiple effect evaporation problem. The first step is always to determine the boiling point in the last effect. So the boiling point in the last effect is actually based on the operating pressure of that same effect. So the second step is to determine the total amount of vapor evaporated by overall material balance. So we will make overall material balance on our entire system and determine the total amount of vapors evaporated, meaning it has already summed up all the water evaporated in each of the effects. So that's the second step. The third is to determine the vapor produced in each effect, which actually was first assumed to be equal in the first trial. So from the second step, we get the amount of vapor evaporated in each effect by dividing the total amount of vapor by the number of effects. So from the value that you're getting here, you will divide it by the number of effects, and that would be your first assumption. Your first assumption, that is that the amount of water evaporated in each effects are all equal. Okay? Now, since you have assumed that they are all equal, there's a need for you to determine the actual amount of vapors and check whether the actual amounts that you have solved agrees, or shall I say, is acceptable in comparison to the assumption based on what you have computed in step 2. So that is here in step 3. After determining the actual vapor, you go to the amount of thickened liquor that is produced in each of the effect. So vapor in each effect followed by the liquor in each effect. After that, you will determine the solid concentration in each effect for the effects that does not have the solid contents given. So that's your fifth step. Now, the sixth is you determine the BPR in each effect if there is a PPR. If there is no BPR, there's no need for you to go about this step. You simply go to the next step, which is you will calculate the boiling point of each effect. So if there's no BPR, there's no need for you to determine these steps, or rather to go through steps 6 and 7. This is step 6 and 7. So you just simply determine the boiling point of each effect. This will be shown to you later. Then using heat and material balances, that's energy and material balances, calculate the actual vapor and thickened liquor produced in each effect. If this is different from the previous amounts that you have assumed, you will have to repeat step 4, meaning you go back to step 4 in here. If the actual amounts that you computed are varying by more than 10% from the estimated values. It says there, if this is different from the previous amounts calculated by 10%, you are to go back to step 4. If not, you move on to the next step. So this is the 9th. Then you will go to the 10th step, which is you calculate the Q transferred in each effect. This Q transferred in each effect is actually assumed initially as equal, but you can calculate this based on the individual energy balances of each of your effects. Then after determining the Q of each effect, of course, given the overall heat transfer coefficients for your effects, together with the areas, you can determine together with the delta T, you can determine the heat transfer area for each of your effects. Now, from these areas of each of your effects, you go to step 12, which will require you to get the mean or the average of all the areas that you have computed from each of the effects. And again, this is your second testing here in the steps. If the areas that if the mean area that you have computed does not vary that much compared to the areas that you have computed here, meaning you compare the area here to a mean, if the variation is not more than 10%, there's no need for a second trial. If the mean area or the areas that you have computed here varies from the mean area by more than 10%, there is a need for you to have a second trial. So if a second trial is needed in this step, you need to calculate again the concentration in each effect using the actual values of the V's and the L's. Meaning, you now need to use the actual value of the vapors and the thickened liquor in each effect that you determine here in the ninth step, the actual vapor and liquid liquor rather produced in the ninth step. So you are to go back to this step because there's going to be a correction in the boiling point temperature that you use based on this particular error, which is more than 10%. It will be also shown to you in a little while what that correction is. Then you calculate new value of delta T's. This is what I mean. So there's a formula for this based on the mean area and the area that you have computed here. So you're going to use both the calculated area and the mean area that you have computed so as you'll be able to determine or come up with the new delta T, and we will label that delta T as delta T prime. So this one, the delta T prime. And then you will repeat step 6 onwards. Okay, until everything agrees. That is, your areas, the computed areas of your evaporator will not anymore vary, by more than 10% from the mean of those same areas. Excuse me, class. Normally, 2 trials are sufficient so that the areas are sufficiently equal or comparable, or the error is not more than 10%. So this would be the steps that we're going to follow whenever we do multiple effect evaporation. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13, that is if there's going to be a second trial. Because after this particular step there, the 13th, you will actually proceed here. But if there's no need for us to have recalculation, then all you have is only 12 steps. If we want to go back here for a second trial, or if there's no need for us to do second trial, because we're okay with the result in here on the 12 steps, then we're good to go with the 12 step. We end here. That's our last step. So with the new area, you can now answer the requirement in the problem of what is the area, that is the heat transfer area of each of your effects. And by the way, class, when a problem asks for the heat transfer area of the effects of your multiple effect evaporation system, that would be the A mean. So you don't answer the individual areas that you have computed, but rather you will use the A mean, the mean of those areas. Because when we design evaporators, we don't design evaporators differently. If you go to the industrial processes, most of them, if it's multiple effect, the sizes and even everything in those evaporators that is considered to be a system is the same. They are identical. It's very seldom that you have a multiple effect evaporation system in the industry wherein the sizes are different. So that is why when you are asked for the heat transfer area, you will answer the mean. The mean of the heat transfer areas of each of the effects that does not vary by more than 10% from your computed mean. That is. And then you are already good to go with whatever the problem again requires you to determine. So in our 12 steps, That is if you don't do the second trial here, and that is if we don't also do a trial here again, here on the ninth step. Normally, a multiple effect evaporation problem with no BPR probably could be processed by a student on a student level in 1 hour. One problem in 1 hour. Double effect, that is. If it's triple effect, it's a different story already because there's so many things to determine. What I mean is there has to be no repetition here in step 9, and there's no also need for a second trial in step this is 9 and this is 13. So if there's no repeat, then more or less an hour is good for a double effect evaporation problem. Considering that you have to get the data from the steam table, you have to get the data from the concentration enthalpy diagram, you have so many things to get from tables, and that will also incur time. So using this step now, I will go to that problem which is already made, and all you have to do is understand how we go about the steps, or how do we apply the steps that were listed here. Okay, do you see my do you see this one, the PDF file?
Yes, miss.
Okay.
Yes, miss.
Okay, I forgot to read the problem, so there's a need for us to first read the problem, which is solved by these steps here. So this is the problem that we're going to apply the steps, okay, mentioned. Okay, a double effect evaporation system is to be used to concentrate 40,000 pounds per hour of an organic solid in water from 15% solids to 60% solids using forward feeding. The solution has a negligible boiling point elevation, so no BPR. Steam at 25.3 psig is used as heating medium with the vapor space in the second effect maintained at 4-inch mercury absolute. The specific heat of the feed is 0.90 BTU per pound degree Fahrenheit. Previous operation shows that the overall heat transfer coefficient for the first and the second effect are 400 and 250 respectively. Now, you are required to determine the steam consumption, the steam economy, and the heating surface required. So what is very notable about this problem is we don't know the identity of the solids. But nonetheless, if you're going to simply base it on the percentage of the solids in the feed and in the final liquor, it's not supposed to be a dilute solution. But the problem makes it easy for the one who's going to determine what it requires because the solution has negligible boiling point elevation. If this was not mentioned, you're not allowed to assume that this will have negligible boiling point elevation because of the solid contents that are greater than 10%. Now, one of your classmates asked me, why is there a need to add 1 atm to a certain pressure that is indicated in a problem, whatever that pressure may be. May it be vacuum or may it be gauge pressure. Now, it should have been absorbed actually in thermodynamics that whenever you do calculations concerning systems subjected or operated under given pressure, the pressure should be absolute. If the given pressure and are gauge pressures, then they are to be converted to absolute pressure. So in this sense, this 25.3 psig has to be converted to its absolute equivalent. So we need to add the 1 atm equivalent in pounds per square inch in this case. And that would be the pressure that we're going to use for steam, not this one because this is just gauge pressure. Now, if your system is under vacuum, it is also a primary principle learned even in Chemistry 1 and even in thermodynamics that if it's under vacuum, your pressure is negative. negative gauge. If it's negative gauge, you have to convert it to absolute pressure. Then you will have to add 1 atm. It is a fundamental basic principle that converting gauge pressure to absolute pressure always requires you to add the pressure equivalent to 1 atmosphere. So I hope that's clear already. All your computation should be based on absolute pressure, not gauge pressure. And vacuum pressure is negative gauge pressure. Now, even though the solids in this problem are not given, meaning their identity are not specified, you are given the specific heat of the said solution. Now, then you may wonder, how am I supposed to determine the enthalpy of the other streams, knowing that only the feed CP is given? I need the CP of the liquors as well. So I mentioned to you last meeting that you will be given a formula in this particular sample problem on how you are to estimate the CP for the other solutions or for your liquors given the CP of the feed. In this case, we will not assume that the CP of your feed is that of water, though it says here it's negligible boiling point, because actually the behavior of our solution will never be comparable to water considering its solid content. That is why the problem gives you the CP of the feed. From this CP of the feed, you can determine the CP of the other solutions in the problem. So now you're given also the use of the first effect and the second effect. Now, of equal importance, class, in this particular problem, you have to be very observant is the mention about forward feeding. Where is that? Sorry. Forward feeding. Forward feeding meaning your feed will be introduced in the first effect. The next problem which I placed here, which should serve as your assignment, I will just place it on the announcement, is reverse feeding, meaning your feed will be introduced in the last effect. And this one is triple effect. So this will need a week for you to answer. So this will be, of course, having a deadline next week, a week after. The other one, the eighth problem here, will be having a deadline on the schedule of the exam because this one is very long and it's also multiple effect. Okay, so our goal for tonight is we will determine how we will find ways of answering the required information in this problem. So I will now stop sharing on this particular slide and go, sorry class, and go to this one. So I hope, can you see the PDF file?
No, miss.
Sorry. Why? PDF file. Can you see?
Yes, miss.
Okay. So this will be, if I should be cut, I'll be disconnected, we use the same link. Okay? Now, the problem that I just read is illustrated here. So you have the feed to be 40,000 pounds per hour. Its solid content is 15%, so XF is 0.15. And its CP is 0.9 BTU per pound mass degrees Fahrenheit. Now, your overall heat transfer coefficients were written under the vapor space. So U1 is 400, U2 is 250. And I place in here the operating pressure of the last effect, which is 4-inch mercury. Now, the vapors of the first effect is the heating medium of the second effect. And we still produce the condensate for the heating mediums here, C1 and C2, and the liquor of the first effect is introduced or processed further in the second effect to come up with a final product having 60% solids. So we are to assume that there was no, since there was no mention in the problem about the temperature, then we are to assume that your temperature is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, Glenford, you're raising your hand. Yes. Glenford, you're raising your hand.
Wala,
Agap.
miss. Nag-busy ako laptop, miss.
Okay. So I thought you were raising your hand. It's okay. So there was no mention about the temperature of the feed. So we will assume that it's room temperature. It's okay. So take note of that. If the problem is silent about the temperature of the feed, it's okay to assume that it's room temperature. Room temperature in English sets of unit is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so 75 degrees Fahrenheit. BPR is negligible, so I place it here as 0, and these are our required information. The steam consumption, the steam economy, and the area. Okay, so the solution of this problem actually follows the steps that was itemized in the slides, or that were stated one by one chronologically in the slide. So now, first step is you determine the boiling point of the last effect. So our last effect has a pressure unit in inches mercury. So we need to convert that to pounds per square inch, absolute. Okay, so 29.92 inch mercury converted to PSIA will be 14.7. So your 4-inch mercury will now be 1.965 PSIA. Now you are to determine the boiling point of the last effect. So from the steam tables, if you use this pressure, you will get this saturation temperature. Okay? Now I already took the saturated vapor enthalpy of the last effect so that I will not go back to my steam tables again later on and get this one. Why do I need to get this one now? Because I will be needing this saturated vapor enthalpy in the last effect. I will be needing it in the energy balance in that effect. So now I have already taken it so that I will not need to go back to this particular part of my steam tables and again solve for the or read out the saturated vapor enthalpy. So we have that. Now, the second step is you determine the total vapor produced. So from overall material balance class, the feed that enters is equal to the liquor that left the last effect and the total water evaporated. This V here is the total water evaporated. So given a feed of 40,000, we subtract the final liquor, the final product L2. So we'll have a V in terms of L sub 2. We can't solve anything, so this would be our equation 1. So I have 10 minutes for this one. Okay, now for the solid balance, if I did overall material balance, I also need to do overall solid balance. So it's patterned from this one. And since we are to assume right away that there's no entrainment, if there's no mention of it in the problem, then the feed times its solid content should be equal to the liquor in the last effect times its solid content, or multiplied to its solid content. Now, since the solid content of the thickened liquor of the final product is 60% and that of the feed is 15%, you will right away know that your final product is 10,000 pounds. Okay? Now, the total water evaporated, that is the water evaporated by effect 1 and 2, is 30,000, subtracting 10,000 from 40 based on equation 1. So you have already this one. That is step 2. You determine the total vapor produced. Now, step 3 is your first assumption. You assume that the water evaporated in each effects are equal. So this is what I've mentioned, that whatever is the value you got from step 2, you will divide that by the number of effects. And that would be assuming, and now we will be assuming that each of your effects evaporates 15,000 water and turns it into vapor. 15,000 pounds of water. Now, step 4, you are to determine the amount of the thickened liquor of each effect. Now, you have to understand, class, that this amount of thickened liquor that you are determining for each of your effects is based on this assumption. So as such, the values that you will be getting from step 4 onwards here until we go back to this one will be dependent on this assumption. Why? Because you'll be using the 15,000 in here. So I want to know the thickened liquor coming from my first effect. So the feed equal to the vapor coming from the first effect from the liquor from that plus the liquor in that effect. So since I have already this assumption here, I will simply place it in here. So L1 is for F minus P1. So my L1 is 25,000 as long as this assumption is acceptable. So this is my thickened liquor based on this assumption of the vapor coming from each of the effects. Now after I have done determining the thickened liquor in the first effect, I'm supposed to determine the thickened liquor in the second effect. However, it's already determined here so that I can determine the total water evaporated. So there's no need for me to do material balance on the second effect to determine L2. But you can do that if you want to check. But most of the time, class, it's 100% of the time you will be getting the same value here. So there's no need for you to do material balance on the second effect, just that you will get L2 because you already have L2 here. So that you will get the V. Now you have the V, you have the L. Next is the solid content. Determine the solid concentration in each effect. If you recall, our second effect already has a known solid content, meaning I am only left with determining the solid content of the first effect. So take note, when you want the thickened liquor, you do material balance on each effect. When you want the solid content or the solid concentration of each effect, you do solid balance. You don't do material balance. You do solid balance because that's where you're going to see the X or the solid content of your streams. So your feed will be, the solid content of your feed should be equal to the solid content of your thickened liquor from the first effect. So this is already the solid content of your first effect, 0.24. So we're okay now from steps 1 to 5. So we go to step 6. We are to calculate the boiling point of each effect. Now, calculating the boiling point of each effect requires for you to write down what we call the temperature distribution diagram. It's a simple rectangle divided by the number of effects that you are given. So in our case, we're given a double effect evaporation. So the rectangle that I have here has 2 divisions. If it is triple effect, I should have 3 divisions, and so on and so forth. So what do I have in the bottom part of my rectangle that I have divided? I should have there the boiling point of that effect. In our case here, this is the boiling point of the second effect. Then the upper part is the steam. It's always the case, class. It's procedure. Boiling point of the last effect in the bottom part and steam on the upper part. In the middle, since we have divided this into 2 corresponding to the number of effects, will be the boiling point of the first effect. Now question, how do I determine the boiling point of effect number 1 or of the first effect? Because in the first place, I know this already. This was determined in step 1. I can determine BP1 if I know the temperature of my steam and if I know the formula that would lead me to the delta T1 and the delta T2. Before I discuss this delta T1 and delta T2, I will first, of course, let you get the value of the temperature of the steam based on the given pressure. Again, it's gauge pressure. So you have to convert it to absolute pressure. So then the steam pressure is 39.7 psia. If you go to your steam tables, you will be getting this temperature here, 267.12 degrees Fahrenheit. Now you may wonder why did I get the saturated vapor enthalpy and the saturated liquid enthalpy for this particular pressure for my steam? I will be needing this in a little while. So I already took it now because I don't want again to go back to this part of my steam tables. I will be needing the lambda of my steam when I do energy balance. So needing the lambda will require me to get the saturated vapor enthalpy and the saturated liquid enthalpy. So here it is already. I don't want to go back to this part of my steam tables again. Okay? Now, we have already established that this is the saturation temperature of the steam. Now, you place it here opposite the steam and the saturation and the boiling point of the solution in the last effect in here, the one that you got from step 1. So what remains is this value. How do you get this value? Getting this value needs 2 formulas. Actually, 3 formulas, but the other one is just patterned from the second one. You need the formula of summation of delta T is equal to delta T1 plus delta T2, which is also equal to the temperature of the steam minus the boiling point temperature of the last effect. In cases wherein you have 3 effects, this will be delta T1 plus delta T2 plus delta T3. And you will have here BP3, the boiling point of the third effect. So same principle will apply if you have a quadruple effect evaporation system. So in our case, this would be our simple formula because we only have a double effect. So I will now have this temperature of the steam minus temperature of the last effect or the saturation temperature of the last effect. So my delta T is equal to 142.02. Now, aside from this formula, you need this formula of delta T1 and delta T2 based on the summation of delta T together with the overall heat transfer coefficient. If it's delta T1, the rational expression here that you're multiplying to summation of delta T will have 1 over U1 in the numerator. If it's delta T2, your numerator will be 1 over U2. Both is multiplied to summation of delta T, which you have here, and both will have a denominator, which is the sum of the reciprocal of the two overall heat transfer coefficients. Now, when we substitute the value of the U's and the delta T, this is the delta T1 that we will be getting, and this is the delta T2 that we will be getting. Actually, in this part already, you can check whether you are more or less doing the right thing. The sum of these two should be equal to 142.02 based on this formula. Now, how are you going to use this delta T1 and delta T2? Simple. For you to know the boiling point of the first effect, which is your BP1,